Today is part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Bill Harrison, and we're talking about vision and its role in baseball.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Jeff Rotmeyer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Jeff Rotmeyer, and welcome back to the conversation with Dr. Bill Harrison of slowthegamedown.com. Dr. Bill is a pioneer in sports performance vision. Yesterday, we left the conversation talking about picking up the ball and tracking the ball. So for the people who haven't listened to that, please go back and listen to that. Dr. Bill, to continue in on the conversation on picking up the ball, I think a lot of people are not aware of what they're trying to do. And I'm trying to reflect back on when I played and whether I spent a lot of time trying to watch the pitcher or if I spent more time, looking closer to where the ball would be released. And so maybe there's a level of awareness that needs to take place for hitters to understand kind of what they're looking at.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. It's kind of like, where do you get the most benefit? Do you need to see everything? No, not really.
Right.
You need to be aware of everything, yes. But what do you really need to zone in on? Because you really don't zone in very long, and you need to be there at the right time.
Right.
I mean, let's think about this. Each pitch is a half a second, right? I mean, it's less, 0.4, 0.38, whatever. Half a second.
Right.
And this major league player that I mentioned had 24 at-bats. Well, half a second times 2,400 leaves you 1,200. Anyway, if you do the math, there's just only a few seconds in a game you really need to be paying attention. But those have to be, ideally, really extremely good. And you need to be at the right place at the right time. And not waste out stuff that's not helpful.
Yeah, I like that. And now I'm kind of thinking from a pitcher's point of view. You mentioned not to stare.
Right.
So how does a pitcher who is perceived to be staring, versus zoning in at the right time?
Okay, that one's a good one. And I will tell you, there are individual differences, but a lot of pitchers, well, let's look at it this way. What is it? Let's take it when the pitcher is in a stretch with the man on second base. This pitcher has to identify their target, their area they want the ball to go. I mean, a finite area. But they pretty much have to look away, to check the man on second base. And then they start their action. They may come back around, but then they start their action pretty quickly. And then they can stay focused on their target the rest of the way. Now, to me, that's what they ought to do when they're in the windup, which is they, hopefully throw most of the time. At least they practice that way. And that is, they don't need to keep staring at their target throughout their delivery. It's perfectly fine to look at the target, and then as they go into motion, raise their leg to look down at the ground, and then to look back. The eyes should lead the action, but they don't have to stay focused on the target throughout. Does that make sense the way I've said it?
Interesting. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because they're going to have to do it when they're holding a guy on second, and probably when they hold a guy on first. So here's really one of the things that's in baseball in general is keep the eyes in motion. Keep them moving. Let them move. But you want to make sure, and I guess it really kind of goes back I should go back to step one, and that is every player, no matter what they're doing, defense, running bases, hitting, what is your task at hand? What is your real task? Because that tells them what to focus on. And a lot of them don't know really what their task at hand is. I would say as a hitter, I've asked this question to thousands of players, and it's good to ask them, when you go into hit, what's your task? Oh, it's to get a hit. Oh, it's to drive the runner in. It's to, hit a home run, whatever. No, that's not your task. That's desirable. I mean, usually they have, good things, but that's their goal. What their task is to see the ball really well, make solid contact, or take the pitch properly, in my opinion. See the ball really well, make solid contact, or take the ball properly. Now, pitching, what is my task? My task is to throw a quality pitch to a specific target. And I should focus on the things that help me do that. Base running, what's your task? It's to see the pitcher, and if I'm moving, it's to, in other words, if I'm going to steal, is to see when he's moving home and I take off. I don't wait till the ball's halfway. I take off because he's, committed to throwing home. But it's identifying what's the earliest indicator, what's the earliest thing that is part of your task at hand, and then react to that.
And I like that. What is your task?
Well, yeah, it's automatic. I mean, and the thing is, they might because you get so many variable answers. It's amazing, and someone might have a pretty good idea. So just say, well, but usually what they're focused on is their goal. I mean, you ask them what their task is to throw a strike, or is to hit a line drive. No, that's your goal. What's the task that allows you to accomplish your goal?
I like that. So Dr. Bill, let me ask this. You got a guy that says, hey man, I got great vision. I've got 20/20, 20/15. The eye doctor says I'm good. But what they don't realize is that they're the difference between sitting in a chair and the ball moving 90 miles an hour, and you got to focus and their depth perception and all that stuff. So being able to see letters in a chair is not the same as hitting a 90-mile-an-hour fastball that moves.
Right. Well, it's a lot more complex. I would say this. If you have a player that's not, responding to your coaching and not performing well, I would make sure he has at least 20/20 eyesight, equal in each eye. In other words, it's desirable that it's equal in the two eyes.
Right.
And I'll explain why in a moment. Now, ironically, this may sound a little complicated, but I'm not a big believer in dominant eye. Dominant eye is not a dominant eye. What it is, it's the aiming eye. So a dominant eye, when it's been determined by any player, by any doctor or whatever, it's the eye they aim a gun with, they aim anything with, and it's not necessarily their dominant eye. The dominant eye is determined by the brain, and it's possible I might aim with my right eye, but my brain pays attention to my left eye. And so here's a complicated understanding, but those players with the best eyes for baseball, their brain does not have a preferred eye. It uses both eyes. And both eyes feed the brain, and when they feed the brain correctly, that's when they see slight changes of velocity. Now, the key to seeing slight changes of velocity is that gives timing. That gives visual timing. And it gives them natural ability if you can see the slight changes of speed of pitches, because even if a pitcher doesn't intend to change the speed, but they hold the ball a little differently from pitch to pitch, there might be 2, 3, 4 miles an hour difference of a pitch, even though the pitching motion looks the same. So the best hitters in my experience, including George Brett, got to where they could see slight changes of velocity. And they were known for great timing, and I could mention a number of players of this type. Most players, on the other hand, in other words, the majority of players, their brain does not pay attention to both eyes simultaneously. It might be 20/20 in one eye and 20/20 in the other eye, but the brain has a part of the decision-making here, and it says, I just habitually don't like to pay attention to my left eye if I don't have to. And then this hitter becomes a one-eyed hitter. Now, there's many. And these one-eyed hitters can become very good hitters with great mechanics. And they hit the fastball quite well. Not necessarily the superior fastball, but a good fastball. They could become very successful. This guy might hit a ton of home runs and a lot of RBIs, and he might be a very, very good hitter, but he's purely a fastball hitter. And he's not very good at breaking pitches or off speed or slight changes of speed. That's a hard one. Not many eye doctors know how to identify what I just described, and therefore it's very difficult to say carte blanche, here's what you do. But you can do it as a coach. You can know this guy is really great. If we're getting fastballs, he's really right on time. But if we have a guy that might not be a very good pitcher because his release points are not good, are not consistent, and this really good hitter doesn't hit that guy, or the guy that throws the change, which obviously a lot of guys struggle with the change. That is really based on how well the brain uses the two eyes together. And this is not meant to be self-promotion, but I do believe we in our company called Slow the Game Down, which is online under www.slowthegamedown, we have products that are trainable, training products that can train that ability to be better. And even George Brett wasn't very good. But George followed our training, and he got to where he could really use the two eyes together and therefore be able to see slight changes of speed, and his timing was impeccable.
Nice. And for the people that are listening, I think it's important for them to understand that not any old eye doctor can pick the things up. You know, the doctors like Dr. Bill, who's one of the best, if not the best, at being able to help specifically baseball players detect whether they're using their eyes correctly and whether their eyes are kind of giving them a chance. And really, everyone can improve, but to be able to detect whether your eyes are working and allowing them to be the best that they can be.
Yeah, we actually see players who are like better than 20/20. They may be 2015, they might be 2010. The actual vest is remarkable. It's like they're 28. I mean, these guys can see like eagles, but their brain can't use the two together. Now, let me mention a couple things. First of all, players want the best shoes, they want the best gloves, the best bat to go along with the best instruction, and all of that's great. And obviously, they're remarkable in their ability to really get their bodies stronger and more flexible and all those things. The same thing is with the eyes. There's certain things with the eyes that can be improved. And one of the things that you asked earlier about, you mentioned earlier about not all eyes are the same. Well, one is visual reaction, seeing how accurately, not necessarily how clearly one sees something, but how fast they see it, and how fast they're able to transfer that into their feet, into their hands. So it's all part of reaction time, and it's improvable.
Right.
Some people are naturally incredibly good, but almost everyone can get better with a little bit of effort. So that's kind of been our orientation is, we don't know you're going to be the best in the world. The best player I've ever evaluated, and I never will forget, was Barry Bonds. Barry had amazing visual capabilities. I remember finishing with him one long day, and the general manager of the team, Sid Thrift, I'd seen a lot of players of the Pittsburgh Pirates, this is 1986, And he said, was there anything that stood out? I said, well, and honestly, most of the players weren't very good. I said, there's one that was absolutely amazing. And he said, who's that? I said, Barry Bonds. And before I said that, though, I said, I know he's got amazing vision, comparable to Tony Gwynn, George Brett, Hal McRae, Rod Carew. But I said, this player, I don't know how good he wants to be. I said, if he wants to be good, he's going to be phenomenal. He said, who's that? Barry Bonds.
Wow.
Well, I didn't know that I was that much of a forecaster, but I think Barry, besides being physically, mechanically maybe the best hitter ever, he was the best visually. I mean, he was better than George because everyone knows, he could see pitches, recognize them, take them, and never pull the trigger until he saw the pitch he wanted. I mean, he was the most disciplined visually and mentally and physically. Even if he never hit home runs, he was amazing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. And so, what was it? What was the key? What did the shape of the eye matter? I mean, what was it that made you say that this is the guy?
Okay. First of all, if I had to take one piece, I call it stereopsis, or it's called stereopsis. I didn't name it that. Stereo acuity, which is a high level of depth perception. But related to that is having it not just in good lighting, but in poor lighting and dim lighting. So we call that contrast sensitivity. And some people can see things when it's not very well lit incredibly well, and that was Barry. Some have to have great lighting or they don't see well. That's one of the fallacies of an eye test in a doctor's office, is it's black on white. But in the baseball field, there's nothing that's black on white. There's shades of color, shades of gray. And some people don't do so well when that occurs. Barry could. Now, the other is, it really is, even though we talked about all these things, it's really about how the eye muscles work. Yeah. There's 7 muscles on each eye. And almost every person, the 7 muscles work really well. Almost everyone. But using the 2 eyes together, the 14 muscles, a lot of times there's something that just isn't right for one reason or another. And it can be identified. It can be almost always resolved. And, Jeff, if I may take this moment, I've been so fortunate. Truly, there was very little in 1970 about how to get the eyes better to be a player, to be a better performer. We had to work our way through this. But here we are, quite a few years later, and I've learned a lot. I keep learning every year. And one thing I'm going to tell you I've learned, I wish I'd have known a long time ago, is all of this that I'm talking about is predicated on a healthy brain. And unfortunately, the reality is there's a lot of brain injuries, as we all know. We think of concussion where a guy is knocked out, but there's a lot of head injuries that aren't that severe by any means. And almost everybody, they shake it off and they say, well, I'm okay. And they may go to the doctor and the trainer and go through the concussion protocol and say, yeah, you're fine now. Or, take a week off. We'll test you again 2 weeks and you're fine. You've passed the concussion protocol. But I'm here to tell you, most of the guys who had a head injury and gals who had a head injury and had to go through the concussion protocol, their eye muscles and the visual centers of the brain do not work properly for quite some time. And some never until they go through some very rigorous training to get it functioning correctly. In almost all cases, they can recover. They can even get better than they were before. But a lot of times it takes specific training. So there's a lot of complexity in this game, and that head knock can occur, sliding into second base and getting hit, hitting the head on the knee of the second baseman or whatever. And sometimes they're not reported.
Right.
But this is why it's so darn complex. You can have a player doing everything, performing well, and then it's like they're not the same player again. And sometimes these hidden factors contribute to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that come into play, and we're learning more every time. And the brain is definitely a big part of that.
It's a great sport. Baseball is fabulous, and it's tough, but it is incredibly tough at times.
Yeah, and going back to Barry Bonds, this is something that Barry actually worked on this stuff.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
And as someone from the outside, we see them take batting practices all the time. We see them work on their mechanics, but there's a lot of things that we don't see. And vision training is definitely something that we don't see these guys do very often.
No, and you're right with Barry. Barry was unique more than just about any athlete. He wanted to assure that he was clearly the best at this. I mean, at that, whatever it was. He wanted to be the quickest one to tell time. He wanted to be the quickest one to do anything. He had this competitive nature, and I don't know how you train that. I mean, genetics were probably part of it. But yeah, he was unusual. Now, let me mention another thing. I've had a few players who had like extraordinary eyes. I've told them, most of my experiences with professional guys. So I do see college players and high school players through the years, but most of them have been professional guys. And occasionally I'll see a guy and I'll say, oh my goodness, he's exceptional. And they never, ever perform well. Now, why? Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is I think most of the non-performers think too much. And they're thinking, it's like driving down the highway. They're thinking about everything in the world, and they don't see what's going on the highway. They miss their turn. They forget to stop and pick up something. I say that everyone that's still listening has had that experience where your eyes are open, they're looking straight ahead, they're capable, but the brain is elsewhere, and you don't see. And I think that happens to a lot of players who really have phenomenally good eyes. And so thought stoppage, getting them to get to where they don't think is a real critical step. Some of them are just so natural. This is a wonderful guy. I mean, he's a great guy. I remember seeing Adam Dunn when he was about 20 years old. Cincinnati Reds. It was about 1996. And he had not yet signed, and he's trying to make a decision whether he was going to go back and play quarterback at University of Texas or he was going to sign with the Reds. And so Jim Bowden had me evaluate Adam. I remember upstairs in the clubhouse, and when I was finished, I went to Jim Bowden, the general manager. I said, "Give this guy the key to the city. I mean, he's Barry Bonds. He's whoever he wants to be." And Adam had the vision, capability to be a phenomenal hitter, which at times he was. But he was so good, he was so natural, he didn't have to work at it. And I don't think Adam ever really learned how to best use his eyes and his body. I don't think he ever learned how to pick up the ball out of the release point, how to track it effectively. But without knowing anything, he did it successfully 40, 50 times a year, where he did 40, 50 home runs. But I think Adam Dunn could have been maybe not as good as Barry, but just about as good as Barry Bonds if he'd have been as disciplined. But he didn't have the need. It's like he's a great guy. He's a happy guy. He really was very successful, and he didn't have the burning desire to be great. Like George had the burning desire to be great because he wanted to be better than his brother. And Barry, I think, wanted to be better than his dad. So sometimes there's issues that impact whether they get the most out of what they're capable of.
Receive a Baseball Awakening decal by subscribing on iTunes and leaving an objective review. To claim your decals, screenshot the review and email it to Jeff@baseballawakening.com. That's GEOFF@baseballawakening.com, and we'll get that your way.
Yeah, so when you look at today's game, the strikeouts are getting up there. The pitchers are better than they've ever have. So we're not used to seeing this type of velocity and this type of pitching. What are your thoughts on today's game?
Well, a couple of things. Is this. I have no problem with the great emphasis on refining mechanics and some of the things that have been learned. And I don't want to pick on one element, but obviously the common term in the last couple of years has been launch angle. But I think some of these capabilities have to become natural. And if a hitter is up there thinking about getting the right launch angle, or that on a swing he didn't have the right launch angle, he's probably not going to have his focus on seeing the ball correctly. So they can be a distraction. They can get him off course, I guess is what I'm saying. That's one thing. The other thing about today's game is I'm not over-impressed with the pitchers' velocities. They're throwing fast. They're throwing hard. But, in fast-pitch softball, and particularly on the men's game on the international level, hitters have less time to hit a ball than our Major League Baseball players have time to hit a ball. Because it's all about time. It's not velocity. It's how much time from the time the ball is released. And those balls are hittable if you see the ball really well. One of the players that I've enjoyed working with many years was Mike Sweeney with the Kansas City Royals. And Mike, I can't tell you exactly the year, it wasn't but about 5-6 years ago, was picked up by the Philadelphia Phillies. Now that I think about it, it might have been 7-8 years ago, but whatever it was. It's picked up by the Phillies in the final month or two of the season. And I remember he was like 38, I believe, at the time, 37. And he hit, my mind slipped here, the fast pitching closer from Cuba. Chapman. 102-mile-an-hour fastball in the playoffs. And here's a 37, 38-year-old guy that hit a rocket off of him. It's doable, but he had to see the ball really well. It's really demanding on seeing the ball exceptionally well. So with increased pitching velocity, hitters have got to get more solely dedicated to seeing the ball. They cannot be thinking and they cannot be feeling their body. They got to go on natural capability. And they practice all of that so it becomes automated, if you will.
When we were talking earlier, you talked about the guy that you saw the other day, and he felt like he saw the ball good 10% of the time. What is, and obviously you might not get to the point where you see the ball well 100% of the time, but what is...
Right. Well, you know what? Let me say something. If that was the emphasis when you were 5 years of age, 6 years of age, 10 years of age, 14, 18, 20, you might get pretty close to it.
Yeah.
You might get pretty close to it. The problem is all the emphasis on all the other stuff makes it less than important. And if you make it important, and here's why it's important. I'll guarantee you, if I were to play today, I would make it number one critical issue for me. Yeah. And here's why. If I can see the ball coming out of the hand, and I can, if I see the ball coming out of the hand, I probably will never get hit and hurt. Right. It's going to protect me. If I see the ball coming right out of the hand, I see its trajectory, and I know whether I should be turning away or what I should be doing. So I think that these kids we get them out there playing Little League and other youth league playing, they don't know how to see the ball, and I think a lot of them are just scared because they have no idea where the ball is coming from. And rightfully so, they probably get hit. So from self-protection, I think hitters ought to be taught how to pick up the ball early.
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Bill, and something that, since I've been coaching, that I get better every year, that I learn more, that this has to be a big focus, to seeing the ball and the timing. They kind of go hand in hand. And if we see the ball, then it improves our timing. And then the swing is the swing. At least we have a chance if we can see the ball and time it. And there's a saying that a bad swing on time has a chance.
Well, let me give you one thought here. I have a fellow who's brought his two sons to me. They're 13 and 11. And he does a great job training them and getting them trained. But the 13-year-old is very gifted. He's got very good eyes, and I have no doubt that he should be continually successful. The 11-year-old is an exception. He might even be a better athlete. But eye-wise, he's one of about 1%, maybe 2% of all children, all people who have a nerve issue with the muscles of the eyes that heretofore no doctor knows how to train. I mean, I don't know how to train. It's a nerve. It's even hard to identify, but the nerve is not working right, therefore the muscle doesn't work right. So here's what I know about this kid. He will never be able to see all pitches, breaking pitches and change of speeds, and have any kind of timing. He can be a great fastball hitter, and that's what he needs to learn is my eyes are geared to be a fastball. That's all I can do. Now, so what does that mean? Then he better get very good at recognizing the pitch early. He needs to recognize the pitch coming out of the pitcher's hand. So if it's fastball, he's on time and he's there. But if it's something else, he's already in the take mode because he doesn't want to be chasing off-speed pitches because then the opposing coaches are going to take advantage of him even more so. If he takes and spits on that changeup or that breaking pitch, it's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with this guy. And now they throw him a fastball and he hits it again. So the guy that can only fundamentally see the fastball, he needs to really be good at fastball recognition and the ability to take every other pitch. And he'll have a better opportunity to, I'd say at least through high school, being able to be competitive. Might get tougher in pro ball. Probably will. I have not seen a player in pro ball successful. I've seen a couple, but I really haven't had any real successful that have that type of issue. They kind of get weeded out.
What's your thought on video games?
That's a good one. I don't know that I have enough. I wouldn't. Boy, that's a good question. First of all, using the eyes on a smartphone is very dangerous.
Okay.
That's got to be a shocker. And there's a couple of reasons. One is the focus up close is not what a baseball player should be doing a lot of. They can do enough to do their studies, but they shouldn't be locked in up close on a video game hours on end. And there's some damage to the vision that can occur, some of which can be resolved, but some of which can't. The biggest problem is, and this is I could probably talk an hour or two on this, blue light is what makes a flat screen work, which is a smartphone or a tablet or a flat screen TV or a flat screen computer. But up close, holding a phone just a few inches from the eyes, the blue light comes out of those phones, and it does lots of negative things to the eyes and the brain. The first thing on the brain is it disrupts sleep, and the quality of sleep can really be affected, particularly when one looks at the blue-lighted screen, and it doesn't look blue, but that's what it's called, blue light. when they look at the screen,
Right.
say after 8 o'clock at night, they may not sleep well at all, which then lack of sleep can influence their performance. It can certainly influence the way they practice because they're tired, they're lazy.
Right.
But the blue light in the bigger picture can burn cells in the central vision. We call it the fovea. The fovea has what are called cone cells, and it has tons of them. I mean, I forget 7 million or something like that. But they can get altered by blue light permanently and never recovered. It doesn't happen overnight, but it certainly can happen over X amount of time. And the irony is, it's more dangerous the younger one is. If they're 20 years of age, it's not quite as dangerous as it is for a 10-year-old. But it's more dangerous than it is for a 30-year-old. So if back to the video games, ideally they'd be looked at from a distance on a computer or on a TV. I think there's some benefit by getting the experience of looking for details, just noticeable differences, quick recognition. Those are skills that need to be improved, and they can be improved various ways, and the video games can have some benefit there. So I guess it's everything, like everything. There's strengths and there's weaknesses, or there's benefits and there's negatives. But the blue light is something everyone should become accustomed to, because we may have a horrible recognition 10, 20 years from now that the blue light that started availability, in the 2000s, flat screens weren't available to, 2005 or 2008, 10. And obviously they proliferated across the world. And
Right.
that there may be some real price to pay before long.
Yeah, that's scary to think about.
It is scary. It is scary.
So Dr. Bill, if I was a listener and I said to myself, man, this is some great information, I need to find a way to incorporate that into my kid training routine. How much time, because everybody blames time as the reason not to do something. So how much time should be dedicated to the vision training to have an impact?
Well, let me say this. I have a little different bias in that, and it'll tell you what it is. First of all, please understand, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing in just about everything.
Right.
So I can think I know how to teach hitting or pitching or base running, but I don't have enough knowledge, and I actually do more harm than I do good. And the same thing is on training the eyes. A little bit of knowledge can be dangerous. Now, I've been at it too long to have enough energy to fulfill what I'm going to describe. But there needs to be coaching clinics, and there will be coaching clinics, so that some of this knowledge can be increased dramatically. Not just discussed with what I do here or picked up in a book, but really get some hands-on experience. Mm-hmm. My partner is my son, Ryan Harrison. He's worked with me for 20 years with lots of major league clubs and a lot of colleges. And he does train players primarily, but he will train coaches and expects to have certifying clinics where coaches are certified on how to do the training and how to get the best results, what to do, what not to do. Mm-hmm. So information on that can be attained through slowthegamedown.com or Slow the Game Down on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, Slow the Game Down. And he'll be making announcements of the availability of those, some on the West Coast, some around the country. But I think that starts with the coaches. Now, the next thing is, I think if it's no more than 5 minutes a day to a player, they should develop something on scene. So what I would do is, if depending on the way I have my practice workout or whatever, I think hitters need to stand in the bullpen and see pitches a lot more often from close up Now, they don't have to be in the batter's box if the pitcher's wild. Even if they get behind the catcher and get in a hitting position or get behind the screen and just work on seeing pitches, they'll get better. Hitters do not see enough pitches. They just absolutely, we're expecting them to hit in games, and they don't have much experience of seeing pitches. They need to see a lot more pitch balls, and they'll get better. Even if they don't know exactly what they're doing, they'll get better. They need
right.
more.
What about a machine?
I don't know. It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But I'd rather see it live.
Yeah.
Let me give you an idea. One of the things that is not utilized enough is working on seeing the ball playing catch.
Yes.
See, when you play catch with a partner, you ought to see literally where the fingers are on the ball as it's released.
Right.
And how the ball is spinning. And the direction of the spin, the rate of spin.
Yes.
And all you do is playing catch. And you're not trying to get a hit.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And I always, I used to always ask our catchers, man, you guys see more pitches than anybody. Why do you not use that time to work on picking up the ball and working on it? Even though you know what's coming, that's probably the best scenario, that you know what's coming. Then now you can work on kind of seeing the shape and seeing the pattern.
So let me ask you this, Jeff. How many times do a catcher get a foul ball to the mask?
Yeah. I see where you're going with that.
Well, that's a head injury. And just so you know, some can tolerate more than others.
Right.
But you never know who can't.
Yeah.
So now they don't end up seeing as well. They might see well enough to still catch, but maybe not well enough to hit. Now, while we're on this, how many umpires get hit direct in the mask with a foul ball?
There you go. Huh.
How well do they handle it?
Yeah.
Most of the umpires are not, because of their vision and their brain, might not be as in good enough position to handle that knock as well as a catcher.
Yeah.
But they're both influenced.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good point.
Yeah, well, I know it hasn't been thought, and I didn't through the years think about it until more recently.
Yeah.
And so Ryan Harrison actually is training NCAA softball umpires.
Nice.
And it's amazing how well they don't see the ball.
Yeah.
Because they've never been trained.
Right.
And on top of it, they have vision problems even trying to do it.
Right. So would your suggestion be?
So lay off the umpire, would you? Darn it. Yeah.
Would you suggest that them go learn how to see the ball in the hands best as they could?
The umpires? Well, that's important, but it might not be the highest priority. Umpires stop tracking the ball probably 20 feet from the catcher's glove, and they see the rest of it away in the peripheral vision, which is inaccurate. And they need to learn how to track the ball into the glove, and you can do it. They can do it, but they just need to learn how to do it. That's right. I'd rather them track the ball the last 20 feet into the glove and have an awareness of the strike zone than be focused on picking it up out of the hand initially.
Yeah, that's a good point. Otherwise, they'd probably be a player, right? Right. But boy, man, Dr. Bill, I learned a lot today, and I hope our listeners got a lot out of it too.
Well, I hope I didn't confuse you, Jeff. Vision is confusing. It's very complex. I will tell you this for anyone that's listening. I've been studying eyes for over 50 years.
Yeah.
And I learn something every year.
Yeah.
It's like, I wish I'd have known that.
Yeah.
But you just kind of have to realize it's important and keep plugging.
Yeah, I love it.
Building your knowledge based on what you see and what you experience.
Well, Dr. Bill, sir, I really appreciate your time. Again, I learned a lot.
Thank you, Jeff. To all your coaches, I wish you well. You know, being a coach is such an important job, and sometimes it's sort of relegated to picking up balls or whatever, but it really has an influence on young people's lives and can be very, very positive, and usually is.
Yeah, thank you again, and have a great day.
Okay, well, thank you for talking to me, and thank to everyone that's listening.
I'm Jeff Rottmeyer, and thank you for listening to our conversation on the Baseball Awakening podcast. Stay tuned for our recap show tomorrow.